joined by Naomi Azalea, who's Acting Director of the Digital Learning Hub at Imperial College London, Neil Morris, who's Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Digital Transformation at the University of Leeds, Sam Brenton, who's Director of Education, Innovation and Development at the University of London, and also Bhavin Bakaglia, who is EMEA Partnerships Director at Coursera. So today we're discussing developing digital skills for student and staff in UK universities, which are two equally important component parts of any university's digital transformation process. Naomi, I'd like to come to you first to ask you about your work at Imperial and how you've sought to bridge the employability gap as part of the digital transformation, and in particular, providing students the tech and digital skills they need to be in the current workplace.
Thank you, Alistair. Yeah, no, it's a pleasure being here. Yeah, definitely. At Imperial, we are definitely watching closely the government skills agenda. I would say across the board, not only digital and technical skills, but all skills, and we keep it in mind to post-COVID careers landscape as well. So this will be front and center of our future planning, alongside with embedding research further into education. And so I expect that this will see us working more with industry partners on the career side. So as you know, there's a combination of our learning and teaching strategy and our academic strategy is directing our effort towards this area. In our learning and teaching strategy, we have already started work, massive work into reviewing our curriculum and assessment, transforming our teaching and pedagogy into a more interactive style, fostering an inclusive and diverse culture, as well as the very area in which I work, which is developing online and digital tools and practice that can enhance the curricula, pedagogy, and our community. At the same time, with our academic strategy, we focused on the global challenges, on tackling global challenges, and so bringing together research, education, and translation activity across Imperial. This is because together with technical skills, we also know that employers are looking for a broader set of skills. Hence, multidisciplinarity is key, and we bring together different areas from college to tackle real challenges, global challenges, as well as giving the opportunity to students to develop their transferable skills as well. Even more in a digital world, I think it is important to be able to communicate effectively, to be able to work in a team in a remote setting, and then work and have effective project management practices.
So one of the challenges is not just the process you describe of embedding the skills, it's also keeping pace with an evolving skills landscape. So what does it take for a university like Imperial to develop curriculum and content that can constantly respond and change as the demands from industry and government and all these other factors keep changing faster now more than ever?
Yeah, well, I think based on my experience, I think it's creating the kind of mindset and space for collaboration, exploration, and innovation at scale. Of course, with this year, we've been pushed to be innovative and creative in the way we tackle challenges in education and in a remote setting. And I'd say that we had a few excellent pilots and activities that we've implemented that I would see scaling in the near future. So I'd say it's just creating that space for more innovation at scale. So what we're doing is looking at our physical and digital infrastructure, so reconfiguring learning spaces. We've just concluded a pilot on the conversion of record lecture theaters into small group interactive learning spaces at scale. And also fostering your internal network in terms of multidisciplinarity, as I was saying. So increased collaboration across departments and across faculties. We have a couple of projects that do exactly that, and that, for example, it's one is called I Explore, and we have some modules that are available to undergraduate students that want to take courses that are outside of their chosen discipline. And this also is bringing these undergraduate students closer to topical areas in science that is still not offered in our programs, but it is pioneered by our researchers. at the same time is also fostering the external network, so partnering with industry partners more, bringing in the innovation they're working on. And this is very much the area in which I've been working these past 4 years with regard to digital learning. So partnering with strong companies that can innovate the way we teach. And learning design ultimately is like creating opportunities to co-create and interact with knowledge, especially when the learning is happening. Especially what we have done lately is developing practical skills training in a remote setting, again pushed by the pandemic, but it was already in the making. Now the pandemic has heightened the hype, and we've developed in chemistry an XR setting for chemistry labs. So using HoloLens, we've been able to connect small groups of students that were connected remotely in their homes. They were devising the experiment and then guiding a teaching assistant in the lab on how to make the experiment. And so they were engaging real time when the learning was happening, and that obviously enhanced the learning experience, and so push the quality even higher.
Wow, that seems like a lot of work in not a lot of time. I mean, I just, Sam, I'd like to come to you next, just to pick up on that point that Naomi made about, firstly, room for innovation, but also the rate of change and how it's accelerating and changing universities' plans. How has that worked at the University of London?
Well, we've got about 50,000 students all around the world studying on over 100 distance learning programs. So we're used to teaching online at scale. That's what we do. We've seen the pandemic has increased demand significantly. So we've got more students than ever. Students' expectations have changed, I think. I think it feels to me as though we have a generation of students studying online with us now who didn't perhaps expect to be studying online, but it suddenly became a viable option for them through the pandemic. So I think student expectations are changing. And I think it's really important that we engage in a dialogue with those students about what higher education is, not just online higher education, but the fundamentals of higher education, how you learn, and then how you learn online, what it is and what it isn't, that it's not just lectures. We're doing something else here. We're trying to equip people with the tools to learn within and beyond their discipline. So that's all changed. I think practically for us, we've shifted all our production remote over the pandemic, which meant working with faculty in different ways and equipping faculty with different skills to previously when we had our studios. That's been a big change. But really, demand, increasing expectation, and we're launching 11 new online degrees over the next year to try and keep pace with it. So very busy time for everybody, I think.
Just to pick up on your point about upskilling faculty and about how that's been a big change for you, how have you managed that process?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky old one, this. I used to run an educational development department, and we did this, 20, 15, 10 years ago. And it did some good, I think, in the end for students, but it's slow, laborious, incremental. It's about relationships. I think I've come to the view that training in itself is of limited utility, except for compliance type stuff. And in reality, we get very short windows in which to do this sort of work. So I think that rather than taking a training approach, I favor doing things through projects, through making things together, through co-creation. And that central partnership now that's becoming so important between a learning designer and a subject expert. We can't expect everyone to just pick up these skills and do it overnight. So I think shifting the academic role into a kind of co-creation is vital if you're going to make it work. Also, I think faculty have learned a huge amount over the pandemic, and the conversations that we have with them now are very different to the ones we had a year ago. And I think the worst thing we can do in a way is come along and say, well, look, your emergency remote lecturing was all very well and you worked very hard, but that's not how to really do it properly. So throw all that away and listen to us and we'll tell you how to do it. Now, I don't think that's helpful. We learn all the time in lots of different ways. I'm less and less convinced that we have a store of knowledge to impart to the faculty one way. We talk about decolonizing the curriculum, but sometimes I wonder whether we need to decolonize the pedagogy as well, because there's this sort of soft consensus that's emerged in much of the West around online learning and a kind of pale version of social constructivism. And I just wonder if we need to reflect on that and work against homogeneity in online delivery. So I think working with faculty is vital. I think listening to faculty is vital. I think learning about different disciplinary pedagogic traditions is important. They aren't just custom and practice. Lectures aren't all bad. If you take the teaching of law, for example, it's lecture seminar, but there's real fireworks in both of those. The lecture actually models transferable skills that you need in that vocation. And the seminar is, the seminars can be a riot of cross-examination and interactivity and all that, and actually rich and fertile ground to then have a conversation about how to replicate the essence of that online. But I think it means challenging some of our own assumptions and sacred cows about what we think, effective online pedagogy is.
Great, thank you, Sam. Neil, I remember seeing you speak in person way back in 2018 about some of the stuff that we've spoken about already today, that Naomi was talking about, obviously changing the physical space on campus. Sam's talking about, scaling digital education models, and it's all coming to fruition in quite a short period of time. I'm aware that, like Sam, you're in charge of a huge number of students at Leeds, and you've got to be mindful of accommodating different learners in different ways now more than ever. My question was about what role should stackable credentials and online learning have in the development of digital skills in the current education system, and how can this support lifelong learning in a broader context?
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. And just to say, I think Naomi and Sam have really hit the nail on the head in terms of the kind of approaches that are needed to really shift that kind of culture and mindset within our universities. So yeah, in terms of stackable credentials, I think these really do support the skills agenda that Naomi was talking about. The kind of access and flexibility that can be provided with stackable online credentials is really unparalleled. It's only universities like the Open University who have really had this kind of view in the past about the real mission of higher education, to provide education for all. And I think the rest of us at other kind of more traditional universities need to accept that there are more people who can benefit from higher education than those that want to fit into the mold of a campus-based education that's primarily facilitated through lectures and seminars and practical classes. And I really think the pandemic has allowed that conversation to happen much more openly. So this is a great time to be talking about what's the role of universities, what's the benefit that higher education provides, and from that, what are the forms of higher education that we need to offer to enable everyone to really be able to benefit. So I'm increasingly really convinced that the whole sector is going to get behind this notion of online stackable credentials and understand that we've got a massive role to play to provide the upskilling and the reskilling that we all need to support those global challenges that Naomi was talking about. And I'm really excited that universities across the UK and internationally are really now thinking about collaboration and partnership and working with partners like Coursera to really think about how we can bring our research strengths and our pedagogical expertise into this landscape to really create high quality online learning opportunities that are accessible and available to everybody.
What does that sort of the kind of room for innovation that we touched on earlier, what form is that taking at Leeds? Is it the sort of the project-based approach and the co-creation that Sam mentioned?
Yeah, I was thinking I don't want to answer this question after Sam because I think he's really hit the nail on the head there. This is about people and culture. It's about a kind of a growth mindset. It's about shifting people's view of pedagogy and accepting that all disciplines are different. So I totally agree that kind of training-based approach to this is really not the right way to do this. So yeah, we're focusing on a pedagogy-first, curriculum-led, accepting that digital is kind of core business now, that everything can be digitally enabled. and working through champions. We work a lot through academic champions and providing that professional support to academics so that they can be the subject matter expert guiding and supporting, but that there are professionals there to do the professional activities so that we don't have to have academics, you know, filming themselves, etc. So it is very much a partnership approach of academic and professional staff working together and indeed with students. And it's really important that we continue to enable students to co-create their education, to really decide how they want to experience an education. I think the very worst thing we could do is decide for them what their education is going to be like. So yeah, it's a real triangle of academics, professional service staff and students, I think, is important.
Yeah, it's certainly really interesting to hear the stories about the sort of bottom-up innovation that's been coming through universities, you know, from conversations with students, from having individual teachers and administrators given the freedom to try new things on the understanding that they may not all work out, but it's important to have a space where people feel like they can be creative in their jobs and respond to the current challenges. Bhavin, I'd like to bring you in at this point, just because, you know, obviously Neil mentioned collaborations with Coursera, and I'm aware of the fact that, you know, Coursera's platform has grown massively in response to this transformation. There's, you know, now more than, I think, 70 million learners who take advantage of the platform, and also Coursera for a long time had a for business offering, which it still does, which is slightly older than the Coursera for Campus platform, but the two complement each other now more than ever, given the conversation we're having today, talking about skills integration, talking about employability, talking about lifelong learning. So I was wondering, when speaking to UK universities, what trends are you seeing in terms of skills development, and how are they responding to bridge the employability gap?
Thank you, Alistair. I think, you know, Neil made a wonderful point about kind of this bottom-up learning approach. I think that one of the things we need to be conscious is not having education and learning in general. And actually, a number of learners are kind of taking the approach of developing themselves from within and seeing if they can take a multimodal approach. You know, can I take a little bit of learning from my formal education, so the university pathway, and where else can I kind of learn other skills from? I think in talking to UK universities and what trends we're seeing in terms of skills development, I think one of the big ones is around the fact that careers are now expanded. Graduates will see somewhere between 5 and 7 different careers in their lives. So having simply a kind of a narrow band of learning no longer works. I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine about the fact that this is possibly my third so far, and I expect that will probably change the older I get. I come from a tech background, and I know that tech skills tend to be outdated somewhere between 2 to 5 years. So the old model of when I graduated, of graduating from university, taking those skills and getting a job, that no longer fits. You have to be mindful and cognizant of the need for lifelong learning and continuous professional development. And Noemi mentioned something earlier as well around transferable skills. So definitely see a lot of this. It's really important to have transferable skills if you're going to have multiple careers throughout your life. But also, more importantly, we should be developing the aptitude towards continuous learning, because when the graduates go out into the marketplace, they are going to have that level of continuous professional development or continuous learning. So they have to be able to know how to learn how to learn as they go on. We're also seeing growth trends on what the jobs of the futures are going to look like. And in particular, the focus seems to be on both high tech and high touch careers. So most people will see that there is an inherent need for data scientists, coders, developers, and engineers. But actually, on the other end of the spectrum, you've got a really high demand for human skills, things like communication, teamwork, giving feedback. So a lot of the conversations that we're having with universities are about how do we develop those human skills, and that tends to be kind of a blended approach between getting some fundamentals right down on the online learning platform and mixing that with in-person teaching and training as well. And I suppose lastly, one of the things that we're hearing a lot about is the rise of automation. I think for some time, there has been a conversation about which jobs, which roles are likely to be automated in the future. And we know from the data we've got that any job that's got a routine that can be automated will be automated. Things like data entry, accounting, and payroll. So a lot of the conversation is around how to ensure that we're developing skills for those learners that should automation come into their arena, they're still able to either change up in their career or take those skills into something else.
Great, thank you. I mean, that leads me to a question that we've had from the floor, which is about the embedding digital skills that are needed to industry-linked blended and block learning teaching now and in the future. Is it a case of the type of skills that you're talking about that you need embedding for industry-linked courses are, as importantly, the soft skills that you mentioned, the teamwork, the communication, the problem solving, the critical thinking?
Yeah, so I think those skills are becoming more and more prevalent the more we're speaking to universities. As you mentioned, this approach that the learners themselves are taking, it is this avenue of continuous professional learning or continuous self-development. And when we look at the data that we've got on Coursera's platform, while we can see a lot of data in our leading domains, which are computer science, data science, business and management, there is an entire growth area around what we term to be kind of human skills. And I know some people call them soft skills. And I think a lot of the reason behind that is because those human skills are the ones that are ultimately going to help you transfer from role to role, from industry to industry.
Great, thank you. Sam, I wanted to come to you just to ask about embedding those kind of soft skills and the things that give people flexibility to embed in a number of careers. Are these the sort of skills that you perhaps teach organically when you do take a more project-based and collaborative approach and try and include things like peer learning as well?
Yeah, I think my answer to this is probably not a terribly original one, but it goes back to the learning design, I think. Over the last couple of years, I've made sure that our production process puts learning design right at the heart. And that's the opportunity where you can look really closely at the learning outcomes for the module, but also the outcomes around the other sorts of skills that you're expected to acquire through the degree. And I think that those early learning design dialogue is your best opportunity to try and embed activities, feedback points, collaborations, etc., which enable the students to acquire those sorts of skills. It's always preferable, if possible, to embed that stuff into the curriculum, and that's the opportunity that you get, I think. And like everyone else, we do a lot of bolt-on stuff around the curriculum, but I think looking seriously and hard at the curriculum itself is the key to really unlocking this stuff, so that you design those sorts of skills into the learning itself. It's not always an easy challenge, and we all know that module specifications on which academic approval events are based are often second, third, fourth generation copies of an older module spec. But actually, if you can, right at the start of it, those specifications are the foundational learning design document from which everything else springs, really. So I think you need a kind of nose to tail design-led approach to make sure that you're really doing this.
Thank you. Naomi, I'd like to come to you just to ask a little bit more about embedding those skills in STEM courses in particular. I was reading an interview with somebody a little while ago where they said, obviously you could produce highly employable graduates from fields such as computer science, but there is a danger that they are very knowledge heavy. And so if you start companies with too many of those type of people and they lack the soft skills and the listening and the teamwork and the critical thinking, then you're not actually creating graduates who are as employable as you think, or who may not be able to progress between larger institutions. Is this a challenge that can be sort of remedied in part by diversifying the curricula, or embedding learning design in the way that Sam described?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's exactly the direction we were going, and we are on some courses that we have. The majority of them also, as Sam was saying, the opportunity to include already active feedback and that kind of reflective moments in a curricula early on when you're designing. I think even more so when we are now redesigning for high flex, hybrid, or a fully online experience. that's an opportunity that we are taking, and that is enhancing the quality of the teaching that we are offering as well. As I was saying, we complement that also with opportunity that we give to students to deepen that actually broad their skills, taking courses that are not part of their maybe highly technical curriculum, and they have the opportunity to interact with students from other faculties within the college, and they have to create projects together. So again, trying to keep the focus on interaction, communication, and teamwork. Even in very highly technical contexts, we have a module that is usually aimed at PhD students and staff, but this year with the pandemic has also been open to undergraduate students, and is a course about research computing skills. So it should be highly technical. What we do, we create a multidisciplinary group of students with a very broad briefing, and they have to come up with a project. That includes coding, of course. And then they are asked to present it using a VR program with avatar and poster sessions. And we've seen that, you know, they benefit from each other's skills, if you want. Usually with medicine, bringing the background information, and then data science students putting the heavy coding effort in, but they learn from each other. And that is something that they carry on into their educational career, but they're also the professional career. So it's preparing them with technical and transferable skills that they will then apply always in their path.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got a couple of minutes left. Neil, I'd like to ask you a variation on the same question, which is how much is teaching these soft skills and what sometimes get called employability skills, how can it dovetail with universities' mission to increase access and you solve the problem of bringing in students who perhaps previously, if they tried higher education, they might have been in the right place at the wrong time, and the culture shock and the way of learning would have been too different for them to adjust, and you get high attrition levels and all the things that we're aware of.
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. I think that's a great segue in terms of thinking about how our on-campus provision can really support and enrich our online provision and vice versa. So not only students working together who are predominantly on campus with students who are predominantly online, but also reusing and repurposing learning designs and learning activities that we've perhaps created for an online student audience can be really well repurposed in multiple disciplines for on-campus students. As I was listening to Sam and Naomi, I was just thinking about how important it is to embed digital skills training into the curriculum through teaching, learning and assessment activities. I think we've all probably had failed experiments in the past where we've tried to teach digital skills separately out of the context of the discipline, and they've all failed. So I think Naomi's example of actually getting students to practice using digital technologies and digital approaches as part of their teaching and assessment is absolutely critical and really the only way to do this. And that can be done in an online environment or in a blended environment for on-campus students. So I think one of the things that we've done at Leeds is create a series of online courses aimed at secondary school students. And they're very much about widening access and raising aspirations for students who might not consider the University of Leeds as somewhere that they could belong. And these courses are all about showing themselves as part of our community and giving them that confidence to feel that they can apply to a university like Leeds. And those courses are all skills based. So they introduce a topic, it might be politics, but they introduce it through teaching and learning activities that are developing students' skills. They co-create activities, and they might create a wiki together about politics, but they're learning the digital skills alongside learning the knowledge domain of the topic. And that's increasing their skills, but it's also increasing their confidence and giving them a community space where they can feel that they could gain the confidence to apply to a university like Leeds. And I think those online courses like that are hugely valuable to raise aspirations and widen participation. Brilliant.
Well, that very neatly takes us up to time, so I'm afraid we're going to have to end things there. But thank you to Sam, Naomi, Neil, and to Bhavin for joining us today. This session will be available on demand, and if you'd like any more information about any of the topics discussed, then please do contact THE and we can connect you with the right people.